In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
We're not going to be able to enjoy this for much
They're
longer.
eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
People of Springfield, please don't eat my cats.
So
Why would you do that? Eat something else. People of Springfield, please don't eat my dog. Here's a catalog of other things to eat.
They're eating the dogs.
And it's so funny that Trump gets tagged for perpetuating this myth about pets being eaten by migrants in Springfield, Ohio, and elsewhere. I think that Kiffness, actually, that song did more to extend that story than anything. But of course, that was just a misdirection play by the D.C. press corps, so they didn't have to address the underlying point, which is Springfield, Ohio, and these other small communities that we discussed at some length over the last several months, being overrun by people from other countries without the ability to accommodate them in terms of housing and schooling and municipal budgets, public safety issues, of course. So, I mean, that's really the issue, and the issue is ever present as per this caravan that's currently heading towards the southern border.
Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Haiti, Costa Rica, Panama, Nepal, Afghanistan, and Central America, La Verdad reports. The migrants are hoping to make their way to the United States before President-elect Donald Trump takes office on January 20th. As the migrants make the trek, some say they're leaving their countries because where they're from is dangerous. They have no security or job opportunities to support their families. Cartel violence, high unemployment, and economic crises in South and Central America are driving more people toward the United States.
Yeah, well, there's no question about that, but the question is what our laws provide and how we enforce or don't enforce them, and the implications of not enforcing them. Something J.D. Vance said in an interview with Tucker Carlson before the election is relevant, across government, but in particular here, because even if we get the right people in at Homeland Security and the right people in at Customs and Border Protection and ICE, you still have this administrative state. The administrative state is a problem. The men and women of always in the federal government is a problem across the board. All these policy issues. Take a listen to Vance. But the encouraging thing is Vance and the Trump team understands this, and I have a feeling they and their cabinet secretaries are going to do something about it.
Trump's main campaign platforms, one of the main things that he talks about, and of course, I think he learned in some ways the hard way during his first 4 years in office, is the president recognizes that if you have people in your government who you tell to do something and they disobey you, that's not like checks and balances. They're part of your government. The check and balance is the House, the Senate, the judiciary, right? If the people in your own government aren't obeying you, you have got to get rid of them and replace them with people who are responsive to what the president is trying to do. If you don't have that, you don't have a real democratic accountability.
You've got to be a nut cutter because that's the system at stake.
That's right.
That's democratic control. How do voters have any control over their government if the people they elect have no control?
That's exactly right, man.
Mark Morgan, former U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner, joins us now. Mark, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Dan, Amy, thanks for having me. If I could tell you real quick, so I was listening to the song you were playing, and I got to tell you, really appreciated that because for the first time in 4 years, I was actually able to smile about a very serious issue, right?
Yeah.
Because I know after 4 years, we're actually going to fix this crisis. And so I appreciate the way you led off.
Well, let's start with, those border communities, but also all the communities around the country that became border communities like Logansport, Indiana, and Whitewater, Wisconsin, Springfield, Ohio, Charleroi, Pennsylvania. What, from your, professional perch, what can be done to essentially return those communities to their residents?
Yeah, well, the first thing, there's a multi-layer strategy has to be applied, and we're good to go because we already did it under the first administration, which led to the most secure border in a lifetime. That's just not an opinion. The stats and data backs that up. And so part of that multi-layer strategy, first, we have to have the right policies to secure our physical border, to deter the flow of illegal immigration, get border security forces back on the border to go against the cartels, to stop drugs, criminals, and national security threats coming in, number one. The other leg to that stool, part of the strategy, is we have to increase interior enforcement. We have to go after the unlawful presence of people that are remain in the country illegally to send a message to the entire world. If somehow you get through our last line of defense at our border and you sneak into the country without inspection, you're not going to stay. So those are two critical elements. The third one I'll say is we have to continue to go after and target the cartels to defeat them. Those are really the three legs of the three-legged stool of success, in my opinion. And so one of the ways that we do is we start removing people from our towns, cities, and states that are here illegally, focusing on, shocker, wait for it, criminals. I think one of the best things we could do for the safety and security of this nation is remove every illegal alien criminal, including murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members. How about that?
Yeah,
Well,
it
right,
sounds
that's-
good, but how does that look? I mean, how are you going to get them out?
Yeah, Amy, so look, that's a great question, and I get asked that all the time. And there's a couple of things that's very important. First of all, let's go back in history, whether it's a Republican administration or Democratic administration. We've been removing people for a very long time. And one of the stats I love to push out is under the Clinton administration during his 8 years, we removed 12 million. Right, so in every administration, removed millions. So this isn't new. We have an organization called ICE, and a subcomponent within ICE, ERO, is called Enforcement and Removal Operations. Not only have Congress given them a statutory mission, but that is their sole mission, is to identify illegal aliens, focus on criminals, of course, and remove them. And they've been doing it for a very long time, since they created since 2003 to do that. Even under this administration, even though the numbers are the lowest they've ever been, they've still removed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens. So the foundation is there, the authority is there, the entity whose mission is there. All we have to do is what I call just infuse ICE ERO with a good dose of whole of government steroids, right? To just increase the magnitude of those removal operations. We're going to need the assistance of state and locals. We're going to need to remove the restriction that sanctuary cities places on ICE's ability to do their job. We're going to need resources from other federal agencies. And, of course, we're going to need this Department of State to step up to make sure that countries take back their citizens.
So if that all was initiated, going back to the Tony Gonzalez memo that he got from DHS about the number of people in this country illegally who have committed crimes in addition to being here illegally, as well as those awaiting trial, those numbers are something, round numbers, on the order of 400,000 and 200,000 respectively. Just on the 400,000, since they've been convicted, there's no, in addition to being here illegally, there's no questions. How long would it take, do you think, to remove 400,000 convicted illegal alien criminals in this country?
Well, so that's the unknown, and it really depends on how fast we can get all those elements together, right? I mean, ICE is going to need support, but yet they get support every day. I mean, there are state and local law enforcement entities that help ICE on a regular basis. I mean, there's no better law enforcement agencies than the city cops and state law enforcement that knows their communities and knows where these criminals are, know in this case where illegal aliens are. It's essential as part of success that state and locals are going to need to work in a task force environment with ICE. Number two, to be ultimately successful to get to the numbers we should get to remove these criminals as fast as possible, we're going to need to decimate sanctuary cities. I mean, it just defies logic that we still have individuals after the entire country has clearly given us the buzzword now, a mandate. President Trump hasn't been shy, and he's been very clear about when he's going to conduct the largest removal operation. And they voted him in and said, yes, that's what we want. But to be successful, we have to absolutely dismantle sanctuary cities. At the end of the day, it's just devoid of logic. I mean, literally, they are protecting criminals from being removed from their city and state. It's absurd. So to be totally successful, we're going to have to erode sanctuary cities.
One other issue with respect to those smaller communities I was mentioning, many of the immigrants there are not there illegally. They're under temporary protected status. And even if, so it seems to me there are two things. Even if there's another issue with temporary protected status and the corruption of that status, one of the things that needs to be done immediately just to salvage these communities is, okay, you're here, you're in temporary protected status. We've got to sort of do a review of that whole deal. But one of the things we can do is we can redistribute people, spread them out to other places so you don't overwhelm these small communities with, hundreds and thousands of migrants when they're towns of, thousands, just, a few thousand, 10, 15,000 people. I mean, is that something that can be done just in terms of sort of redistributing people while everything else is figured out?
Look, I think our focus, I think everything should be open for discussion. That's kind of what I've always done from a leadership kind of a principle and trait. But I think we need to step back and we instead of getting better at reacting to a crisis, we need to end the crisis, right? And so one of the best things that we could do first and foremost is stop the flow, right? Stop the bleeding, right? So physically secure the border. I mean, for every 2 you remove, if you allow 2 in, you don't get too far like that. So that's number one. And then number 2 is I'll go back to really our focus should be what you already stated in the first part, Dan, is that temporary protected status. The key word in that phrase is temporary, right? But yet this administration has used that as a de facto amnesty to circumvent congressional legislation and law. And so what we need to do, in my opinion, rather than thinking about redistributing them throughout the country, is actually look at that in temporary status where it should be ended and then rapidly remove them.
Okay, I mean that's fine. I'm just, but I mean the concentration of them in small communities is so overwhelming, and nobody really has a good answer in terms of how that happened, other than, as we've talked about, I think with you, with state and local officials cooperating, and that's a problem unto itself. But I mean, I feel like this is. There needs to be a sense of urgency of providing relief as soon as possible, even if some of these things are understandably going to take time. It's like if somebody is wrongly sitting in prison, you don't want them to wrongly sit in prison for 1 day longer. And I think a lot of residents of these communities are in a similar situation. Yeah,
look, I'll go back to Dan. My position would be nothing is off the table of discussion, but to some extent, look, the first time I've really been thinking about this is that I'm processing on air is you're really redistributing the problem. I really
understand.
Think putting a Band-Aid on a cancer patient victim is just redistributing them to another area isn't solving the problem ultimately. I mean, the problem is we've got to enforce the law. We've got to stop circumventing the law. We've got to stop abusing the law like temporary protected status and parole. We need to end those programs. We need to then take those individuals that now do not have any status here and remove them. I think that should be our priority. That's what we should be focused on to do as rapidly as possible, because one, that's going to send a message, it's going to stop the bleeding, and two, what we've seen in the past, we could have a certain degree of voluntary removals, right?
Yeah.
People say, hey, look, I got it, I'm not here, I'm not going to stay, I'm going to work with you to do this in a methodical, meaningful way.
I posited this earlier in the program. This is an idea of a friend of mine. I mean, Trump in this period while he is waiting to assume the office, sending a message to people here illegally to say, look, if you leave now, that won't count against you, that you entered this country illegally. If you don't and we have to deport you, then it will count against you, just in terms of trying to incentivize self-deportation.
Yeah, no, and I think that kind of goes to your point, and again, having some talk. I think that's more of an effective strategy, right? Is that I'll give you an example. Is that right now for people to enter the country illegally, depending on their circumstances, there's a 5 to 10 year bar for them if they're removed to be able to apply for asylum. So that's basically saying, and I support that. Is that look? If you go ahead and work with ICE, and we're not going to make you pack your stuff up overnight. We're going to work with you. It's going to be meaningful. We're going to give you time. We're going to work with your host nation, right? We're going to do this in a humane, meaningful, methodical way. But if you work with us voluntarily, then we'll, for example, waive that 5-year, 10-year ban. So as soon as you get back to your home country, you can start the process lawfully to come. I think that's a fair, a rational, reasonable compromise.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to announce about a future employment in the Trump administration?
Nice try. I'm going to continue to remain silent on that one and let the president make that announcement.
All right. Well, I'm just thinking like you and Holman and Wolf, get the band back together. It could be pretty good. I'm just saying.
Well, hey, look, from my perspective, that makes sense, right? But if you had success, then why not bring back the same team to repeat that success? But that's not my decision.
I hear you. That makes sense to me, too. Mark Morgan, former U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner. Mark, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you both.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving MyPillow with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss and your gain. For the first time ever, you'll get a standard classic MyPillow for wholesale prices, only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, they're going to offer their entire classic collection